Tell me who did not think that tofu is completely bland and nasty. I certainly did, and this recipe goes to all the tofu lovers and especially for the tofu haters. I cooked it by accident, kind of. It's not very complicated, it's quite easy to make. There are a couple of tips of how you can prepare your tofu and make it even nicer, even firmer, and have less liquid, so you will enjoy it more. And I wanted to say this is the best tofu recipe I've ever made, but actually it moved to the position number 2 recently, just the last week, as I already shot this video. Now I have another favorite and I will probably link it somewhere around here when the video will be up, because I will definitely film it. That one is just mwah. So, the second best tofu recipe I've ever made. It's oil-free, it's sugar-free, it's not deep frying, all this good stuff, and it still tastes really nice. It has nice texture on the outside, a little bit of a crisp, a little bit tender on the inside, and the sauce just completes it all. So I do really believe that there are two things to a tofu standalone dish that can make it or break it. One of them is tofu texture, which can be achieved by using firmer tofu or deep frying it. Another thing is the flavor, which can be the dry spices or the sauce, or the wet spices. And we are going to use both things. And let's start with our first tip. The first tip is actually how to drain your tofu properly, how to make it release all the water. And a great way to do it is actually to keep it in the freezer after you drain all the water that's in the package, of course, and then let it defrost, and it will start releasing all the excess liquid, and it will be really easy to press it and to make it squeeze out all the water, basically. I think this tofu has been in my fridge for a couple of hours, up to 8 hours, and then it takes some time to defrost. Just leave it outside for a couple of hours. You have to do some preparations in advance, but it's totally worth it. After which, it's really easy to chop, kind of dehydrated tofu basically, and you can either break it apart using your fingers, or you can chop it into cubes, just what I did here. It will be way easier to roast it. If you want to fry it, it will be way easier to fry it, and it won't be as watery on the inside. And let's start with seasoning. Tip number 2 is actually using cornstarch. Here I'm using around 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, because cornstarch can, and it actually will, dry out the excess liquid from the surface of the tofu, from the surface of those small little cubes, which will give you the nice little crust on the surface of tofu. And when you bake it, it will create this nice crispy layer on the outside, while on the inside, it depends on how you bake it, of course, but you have this possibility of having it a little bit softer, which gives us the bite, but also allows to have a really nice texture and flavor on the inside. So it's kind of like locked in. Also, if you don't have cornstarch, I tried doing it with oat flour. So I basically just grinded some oats, because I didn't have the oat flour either, and I didn't have the cornstarch. So yeah, we have to improvise sometimes, and the oat flour worked just fine. If you have something similar to it, you can use that as well. One of my favorite things to add to all my foods is, of course, nutritional yeast. It gives the cheesy flavor. It's not completely cheesy, I would say, but it's kind of on the cheesy side. It's not cheese-like, but it's cheesy, and it does help elevate the dish overall, and it also does act as like an additional film on the surface of tofu, so it can help drag out the excess moisture as well. I'm adding 2 tablespoons of that. If you don't like it too cheesy, I don't like it too cheesy, I like a little bit of a flavor, so I added 2 tablespoons. If you don't have nutritional yeast, do not worry about it too much. You can also order it from iHerb. I leave my referral code down below. If you're interested by any chance, this gives 5 to 10% discount on different brands. So go check it out if you've been wanting to try some nutritional yeast, which you cannot find in your area. This can be an option. And for me personally, baking is not possible without some smoked paprika. I really love smoked paprika. I really like the spice, the smoky taste that it gives. And if you're missing meat on a plant-based diet, this can be something that would make your senses happy. And I do like smoked paprika. You can see that I'm adding it almost everywhere. One thing that I'm also adding here is beef taco seasoning. It's basically a blend of spices, and it's not necessary to add them here, but I really do like the flavor. It has a little bit of sugar as well, so maybe that's why. And it has a little bit of smoked paprika, a little bit chilies, everything in just this nice mix. You can mix other spices that you like as well, and this will work. And I'm also adding some turmeric for its anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. It's been shown that turmeric is not absorbing in your bloodstream really well, but at the same time, when it's in the direct contact with your GI tract, it helps remove and helps deactivate some of the tumors, and it has overall very positive effect. However, turmeric does have blood thinning effects, so if it does get absorbed into your blood, it has this effect. So if you're taking something like aspirin, please be mindful of that and know your food. I'm adding some salt as well. I just want to drag out a little bit more moisture here, and I also want the salty flavor. After that, we can pat dry our tofu, and then we just cover it with the mixture that we just prepared with cornstarch and seasonings. And here's tip number 3 of how to make great tofu. Know how to use your oven. The oven, actually the 2 factors that are important here. The first one is the temperature, of course. Now, the higher the temperature, the faster the outer layer of your food will get crispy. So it will allow you to have more tender food on the inside, while the outside will be a little bit crispier. And the second thing is the placement of the baking tray, which you can also consider. For example, you can start with the middle section of the baking tray of the oven, and if your heating element is located at the top of the oven, the higher you move it, the faster the food will cook. So you can start with the middle level and then move it up so you get this crisp. And as you can see here, if you use baking paper, be careful to not catch fire on it. That was an experience in itself. I put my tofu onto the higher level of the oven for 200 degrees Celsius. It's around 390 degrees Fahrenheit. Not precise, don't quote me on that, but around those levels. And I left it in for around 10 minutes. I checked on it after 10 minutes and then put it back in on 5 minutes. That's where I burnt my stuff. I mean, the paper, not the tofu. So if you want a little bit more of a crisp or a little bit of a firmer tofu texture, do keep it in the oven for around 15 minutes at this temperature, and you are going to be left with some amazing tofu. And on to the sauce. So here you can use pretty much all the aromatics that you would like. You can use garlic, you can use onion. I just had a little bit of parsley and I had a little bit of leeks. So experiment. I really do encourage that. And on to the tip number 4. Here I'm using some canned tomatoes, and I've been talking about it for a while now. But if you don't have good tomatoes, everything that is store-bought, it doesn't mean that it's really nice and flavorful, even if it's fresh, even if it looks fresh, sometimes even if it smells fresh. If you're not sure about your tomatoes, you can always get canned tomatoes. Watch out for the sodium content, of course, all those things, but they tend to be more flavorful and they are already pre-chopped, so you do save some time for it. Well, adding the acidity into the dish can make it unrecognizable, and if you have some bitter greens that you want to dim down a little bit, this will help a lot. And another additional tip is instead of using usual salt, you can always use soy sauce, and this is going to add the additional dimension to your dish. Instead of just bland saltiness, you'll have some umami flavor in it. And I mean, in many dishes, and when you don't add too much of it, it's not overpowering, but it's a little bit different. And for the spices, I chose turmeric. Once again, I chose some chili flakes in garlic granules. I don't have like the powder, I have the granules. You can add smoked paprika, you can add some cumin, you can add some coriander, whatever spices you think might work best for you. And now our tofu is done and our sauce is done, so you can do a couple of things. You can just mix them all in one plate, or you can add your tofu in the sauce and let it simmer a little bit together for like 1-2 minutes to let the flavors melt in and marry. But what I chose, I was just like super hungry, you know, so I put my tofu onto a plate and covered it with the sauce. And I do like tomatoes. And this looks amazing. I love it. You can garnish it with some parsley, some leeks, some spring onions, and some chili flakes on top. It tastes amazing. It's so flavorful. It's a little bit sour and a little bit spicy, and it's just the perfect thing for someone who explores the world of tofu and who wants it with something less bland than it usually is when it's like swimming in soup or something. Remember to know what you eat, and also that cooking is meant to be enjoyed and also probably shared, so do have fun with it. I will really appreciate your feedback as a comment or a like. Tell me if you liked it, if you didn't like it, and if feedback is very much welcome. And if you're really up for it, please do subscribe to my channel. It means a lot and it literally costs zero. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you later.